Hey guys, I'm QOTW, welcome to the weekly Pokevlog. So, as I mentioned in my last week's late Pokevlog, there was a bunch of new information this week, from E3, from Core, from everywhere really. We got quite a lot of information, kind of doubled up on the information that we already did have, which is pretty awesome. So, of course, there are some trailers, so go check them out in the sidebars, and I will be talking about all the things within the trailers in this Pokevlog. So first of all, the big major news that everybody's talking about is the brand new type. There's a new type, the fairy type. People were right, Sylveon is a fairy type, because there was so much speculation of people saying that Sylveon is going to be this brand new fairy type or whatever. And it is, which is absolutely crazy, because new type in 6th generation, the last time they had new types were in the 2nd generation to balance out types, which I'm going to get to in a minute. But first of all, the only thing we really know about the new types is which Pokemon are going to have this type. So, first of all, we've got Sylveon, of course. We have God of War, who's going to have the additional added fairy type. Jigglypuff, who's going to have the additional added fairy type. Marill, of course, following the same trend, and a brand new Pokemon called Flabébé. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's the new 6th generation Pokemon that's just going to be pure fairy type, which is pretty cool. But I'm surprised they missed out Clefairy, considering Clefairy is Clefairy. Fairy. Fairy is in its name, and they have to make this a fairy type, because in the 1st generation you had Jigglypuff and Clefairy, and they were two the sort of counterparts to the games. They kind of went together. They were two normal types, and I mean, I don't know why they introduced Jigglypuff as a fairy type and not Clefairy, because Clefairy cannot be not a fairy type. Clefairy, it's a fairy type. We must conclude that Clefairy will also get the additional fairy type. I just don't know why they didn't announce it. That was a really weird thing from Pokemon to do. Also, I kind of assumed Togepi and Cottony and Jirachi and a bunch of other fairy looking Pokemon are going to be fairy types. We can sort of assume that these will be later on announced to be have additional types of fairy. Specifically, like Mawile, I think, will also be a fairy type because it only has a pure steel type. I think adding fairy type could make it a little bit better. But Jirachi might be a little bit hard to do because it's already a steel psychic. You're going to have to remove one of the types. Unless they add 3 typings, which I don't think they're going to do, because that would be kind of stupid, adding a new type and 3 type Pokemon. So we know it's super effective against Dragon. Fairy type is super effective against Dragon. We don't know much else though about it. We don't know any of the weaknesses, strengths, or whatever. Although, the official website did subtly hint something. It said that Salamence, a flying dragon type, is going to be weak to fairy type as well. So we can kind of conclude from that flying type is not going to resist fairy type, which we wouldn't probably think it would happen anyway. But I don't think it's trying to infer that flying type is also weak to fairy type, because it's weird that they specifically said Salamence was also weak to fairy type. But I don't think it's going to be that flying type is going to be weak to fairy type as well, because that would mean fairy type would be 4 times effective against flying dragon type Pokemon, and they already have a 4 times weakness against ice. They can't have like 2 4 times weaknesses. They would just be terrible, because there's quite a few of them, and a brand new introduction of one to this new generation, which we'll get to in just a minute. So what I've done is come up with an idea of what types I think it was super against, weak against, and whatnot. A while ago, I actually did some calculations of such, of how many super effectives it has, how many not very effectives, how many strengths, weaknesses, whatever, of each type, and I found that Poison and Psychic were on the lower end, so they were more weak to things than strong to things, and Dark and Fighting were stronger against other things rather than weaker. And now, the main thing with Psychic is that it was changed in Generation 2, or well, the other Pokemon were changed in Generation 2, to sort of dumb down the power of Psychic, because Psychic was far too powerful in the 1st generation, but that was mainly because of a mishap with the programming with the Ghost type. So it became the other way around, rather than Ghost type having the advantage of Psychic, it was vice versa, which was quite bad. But they also introduced the 2 Dark and Steel types, both resisting Psychic, Dark completely resisting it, didn't affect it, and Dark having been super effective against it. But those 2 types, Dark and Fighting, really seem to have a massive power advantage over the other Pokemon in super effective and not very effective terms. So I do think what's going to happen is that Fairy is going to be super effective against Dark and Fighting, but not very effective against poison and psychic, or psychic and poison are going to be super effective against it, because poison's only super effective against grass. That's its only super effective, and I feel like it could have more, and it kind of would make sense if fairies were weak to poison. I don't know, it just seems more sensical than some other types. So in addition to the new fairy type, we also get some new Pokemon. As I mentioned before, I mentioned like 2 of them, so there's quite a few new Pokemon. As I mentioned in my last week's Pokevlog, that I thought there was going to be or hoping there was going to be a large like wildcat animal Pokemon, and there was. So genius me in the past. So it's called Litleo, so like it's a lion, and it's a fire normal type Pokemon. It's a lion cub, so I'd expect it to evolve into more of a lion with like a mane and such, because it is a cub at the moment. I don't imagine that they would keep it just as a cub, because generally Pokemon that look like baby Pokemon evolve into non-baby Pokemon because they're baby Pokemon, and you know, they expect them to evolve. The next one is the one I mentioned before, the fairy type, the Flabébé. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. It has accents over the E's, which is weird. I don't know. But that is actually the translation of it in English. That's what we're going to call it. We'll have to wait till see what Pokemon calls it. So it's actually attaches onto a flower, and it attaches onto the flower for its whole life. And so the flower that it attaches onto is different colours with different variations of the Pokemon. I'm not going to try and say the name again. So you get different colours of flowers with the Pokemon because the sprite comes with the flower. I don't know, something, maybe it's to do with like Shellos, because Shellos are of different colours. Maybe the Flabébé have different colours of flowers in different areas. Maybe in the 3 different areas of the Kalos region, you're going to get different colours of flowers of Flabébé. We don't know, but it's just what I'm assuming, because it would make sense. So the next one is Noviern, which is a flying dragon type. And it's a bat. It's a flying dragon bat, which is crazy, but this is the flying dragon type I was on about. But I was right again, saying it was a bat, but I put that, annotated that in my previous vlog. But it's weird because they made a dragon bat, which is a bizarre combination. But whatever, we actually have a brand new bat type. It doesn't look like it's going to be the replacement for Zubat though, because being dragon and all, I don't think that it could really be just a wild bat Pokemon that you're going to run into a lot, because dragons are typically powerful unless they really are going to dim down Dragon's power and going to make it 4 times weak to Fairy and Ice, with being weak to Fairy, and with Flying type being weak to Fairy and Dragon type being weak to Fairy. But like I said, I don't think that's going to happen, because that would just ruin Dragonite, Salamence, Altaria, and a bunch of Pokemon. So the next one is Talonflame, which is an evolved form of the Pokemon we previously knew as Fletching. So this is actually a fire flying type Pokemon. So we previously thought that Fletching was going to be just the normal flying bird type Pokemon with an evolutionary line, but no, it isn't. It evolves into a fire flying type. We don't know whether this is going to be a replacement for the normal flying normal type, or whether it's just a different Pokemon entirely. So the next one is Squelp, which is a seaweed-looking horsey. It looks like a horsey. It's not a horsey, but it's basically based off seaweed, and it's a poison water type. We also have Clauncher, which is just a pure water type, and it has Kingler's claws. And what I mean by that, it has one claw bigger than the other, which I'm just like, Kingler. Kingler's is a water type with one claw bigger than the other, but with the Clauncher is actually a shrimp rather than a crab. So yeah, there's also an evolutionary line of bugs, so it's like the normal Caterpie Wurmple evolutionary line. It evolves Scatterbug, Spupa, and Vivillon, where the first 2, the Scatterbug and Spupa, are both bug types, and Vivillon is a bug flying type, so just a normal starter forest bug evolutionary line that are probably going to evolve at low levels and whatnot. So it's just the Caterpillar Butterfly evolutionary line. So we also got 2 names of towns. So the first one is Vanville Town, which is the starting town. We don't know anything else about it. We're just gonna assume we get starter Pokemon there and whatnot. The second town we got told about is Sanataloon City, and it's the second town, and of course it's bigger because it's a city, but it's also home to the first Pokemon gym of the game. So this is one we've seen before in the first trailers. It's the big spiderweb gym puzzle thing, kind of thing. So we can only assume it's a bug type. It would only make sense if it was a bug type because it's a spiderweb. So we know the gym leader's name is Viola, but we don't quite know anything else about it. But another interesting thing I would note is that on the official Pokemon website, they point out that the Kalos region is star-shaped. Now, I have no idea what importance this would hold, but it must involve some importance because they put it on to the official website that it was star-shaped. Don't know what that could be. No idea. But he must mean something. So we also have our 4 rivals. Yes, there's 4 rivals rather than 1 or 2 or whatever. We have 4 this time. Let's have 1 for everything to be quite fair. So the first rival is the character that you didn't pick to play. So the 2 play characters' names, the girl and the boy, what you can play as is Callum and Serena. I mean, you can obviously change them if you're playing as that character, but they're the 2 sort of given names, and the one you don't pick is going to be called that Callum or Serena, and therefore they will be one of the 4 rivals that you have. So the other brand new 3 rivals that you have from the start. First is Shauna, an energetic, outgoing girl who doesn't actually know what she wants to do, but she's looking for her ambitions in life. So what I think this is going to be is that she's going to have the ambition or the new she's going to participate in the new sort of Pokemon contest, because we had the Pokemon Theatre in the 5th generation. So I think there's going to be a brand new thing in the 6th generation, and this is her thing, because it's kind of like with May in the anime, because May didn't know what she wanted to do. She didn't really like Pokemon battling, but then she loved Pokemon contests. So I think this is what's going to happen with Serena, that she's going to go off and do her own a new sort of route of whatever they do, whatever they try to introduce. Maybe it's Pokemon contests, maybe they're bringing them back, which I love, but I don't think so because they didn't mention it. So next is Tierno, a boy who wants to be a Pokemon dance team. He wants to make a dance group with his Pokemon, which is a bit different, kind of like the clowns in the 5th generation, but it's each having their own profession. So the final one is Trevor, who has an ambition of filling his Pokedex, and he sort of competes with how many Pokemon have you got, like in Gary in the 1st generation. So they sort of all meet up with you throughout points of the game and sort of challenge it to their own specific kind of thing. So this leads me to think that the play character you didn't pick, Serena or Callum, is going to just follow the Pokemon battling and going to compete you with that, because there's no straight rival that goes to the Pokemon League with you and Pokemon battling. So I'm assuming that's just going to be the play character you don't pick, because it'll make sense because your ambition is to do the Pokemon League and whatnot, and you could be that character, and so that character's ambition has to be Pokemon League. So I would assume that is related into the game. So there's also 2 new styles of battling, not triple battles or rotation battles. This time we have Horde and Sky battles. So the first one, Horde battle, is basically you send out one of your Pokemon and you go against 5 wild Pokemon or whatever Pokemon you run into. So the way this is going to work is sort of confirmed by an image posted on the official Pokemon website, is that if you have a multi-Pokemon damaging move, like Discharge or Surf or whatever, they're going to hit all the opponent Pokemon. And why I know this is because one of the images shown on the official Pokemon website shows that Pokemon using Discharge and hitting all of them, and then saying all the Pokemon were taken out in one hit, in one move. So we know that multi-type moves are going to hit them all, which is really good. We might get some more multi-type moves, because it's going to be sort of a new kind of tactic in the game, that you want to keep these multi-type moves, because in the past they've not been as good as some other moves and whatnot. So multi-type moves are really going to come into use in this game, because, I mean, you have Thunderbolt and Discharge. You're going to choose Thunderbolt, it does more damage. But in this game, Discharge is going to be a massive help, and you're not going to be able to damage your teammates, which is a good bonus, because you don't have teammates, because it's only one Pokemon. So the Sky Battles, the other one, is going to be a battle just for Pokemon in the air. So you can only have flying types or Pokemon with Levitate that can do these kinds of battles. New types of connection have been announced to be released with Pokemon X and Y. So rather than the past where we had to get each other's friend codes and you'd only battle and trade with people directly when you knew the friend codes and whatnot, in the new game you're going to get a new feature called the player search system. So what this does is basically any people in range and with the game with Pokemon X and Y, near to you in like infrared range in real life, you'll be able to pick up the game without knowing who they are or whatever, and just trade with them or whatever. It's the same for online. You can actually find anyone online through Wi-Fi with the same feature, and just trade and battle with them as if you had their friend code, and just battle them and trade with them as if you were with a friend. There's also going to be a new in-game feature called Pokemon Ami, which basically is Nintendogs for Pokemon. So what it is basically you have your Pokemon, you have a touchscreen, and you like stroke the Pokemon and you pet it, and it becomes more friendly to you. And when it becomes more friendly to you, it has more of a chance of doing critical hits in battle and avoiding moves that aren't 100% accuracy and stuff. So now I don't know whether this is going to be related to happiness. I don't know whether it basically, if Pokemon's Ami is going to increase your Pokemon's happiness, and therefore it's just another way for your Pokemon to increase happiness, and maybe it's going to be accelerate quite a lot, and therefore happiness itself, just in-game, is going to increase the chance of critical hits, which completely makes sense, to be quite fair, because in the Pokemon anime, like, the more friendly you are with your Pokemon, the more like resilient they are to battles, and so it would make sense they would do that. But it could be a completely new thing because it's not yet been related to happiness, although it's like friendliness, which is just the same thing as happiness, unless they're going to make this a completely new thing. And since they're changing so many old Pokemon, maybe like Espeon or Pokemon that evolve by happiness has got to be evolved by Pokemon friendliness, and I really hope that they don't make this a necessary part of the game, because I know a lot of people won't like it. But anyway, let's move on to the question of the week. So what gym leader type are you looking forward to getting? And I know a lot of people are like looking forward to a dark type gym leader, because we've not had a dark type gym leader yet. We've had a dark type Elite 4 member, but no dark type gym leader at all in any of the games. It's the one type that we've not had a gym of. And of course, there's fairy type now, we don't have a gym of that. But this is basically a fairy type, so you can let that go. But I'm just totally guessing that they're going to have a fairy type gym. But if you think about it, in the second generation, when dark type was introduced, because dark type wasn't in the first generation, they didn't have a dark type gym. So that means that we're not necessarily going to get a fairy type gym, but I would definitely think that we would get a fairy type gym, because that would be kind of stupid if we didn't introduce a new type and then don't encourage it and whatnot. The second generation was more of an extension of the first generation, and it wasn't as new as the newer games are, because in the first and second generation, Pokemon didn't know they were going to continue, and it wasn't as big and as so separate as the newer games are. So I really think that there is going to be a fairy type gym despite that fact, and a dark type gym. A lot of people have been waiting for that for a long time, and a lot of people have already made up ideas that there is going to be a dark type gym. So tell me what you think down below, and I want to say thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.